Okay, I will call this meeting to order. For those of you who are visiting, if you could please sign in if you have not already. And the meeting is called to order. Okay, first on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for December 16th, 2011. Any additions or corrections?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of December 16, 2011, Knutson.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next we will have public input.
Hello, I'm Roger Olgersma. Most of what I had to say I said last meeting, but I thought of a couple more things in this whole thing on executive power, which I picked up here. It says the executive administrative power of the city will be vested in the mayor. Basically, I think that's pretty good. It lists a whole bunch of things. The only thing that I would think might be good to change is that it says appointing directors. I assume that means department heads. I think that it would be good if the council had to approve department heads. Maybe they do already, but to change that to being the mayor only. I think the department heads have to be people that can both work with the mayor and the council. One thing to add a little bit to what I said last time. If the mayor gets too much power and the council not much, that the mayor can just overrule things. I'm not sure it's a problem with the current people, or I don't even know the guy that proposed this. But if the mayor gets enough power, they can overrule the council and do whatever they want. The risk of the mayor getting bought, I mean, this is a chartered long term, so I'm not talking about anybody in particular now. But the risk of a mayor getting bought by one person or one company, and if the mayor has too much power, that could be too easy to have corruption. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other for public comment? Okay. Next, we have the proposal. This is in response to the proposal from Joe Kirby regarding a less involved city council. And this involves Section 3.01 of Executive Power of the Charter. As it states now, it's the executive and administrative power of the city shall be vested in the mayor. This wording, this is extended into going into detail. Dave, could you explain where this came from, the wording?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The additions for Section 301 were from a pamphlet that I believe was first put out by Janet Brecky, who was the first city attorney under the new form of government, and based on her legal research regarding what administrative duties meant under the law, and it listed those out singularly in a chart form, and this merely just flows verbatim with what her legal research found as far as what the administrative duties of the mayor would be. And it just followed what Dee Knutson had indicated at our last meeting and had read off. So she had read from that same chart, so that's where it's from.
Personally, I like this. I can see that it would be very helpful for people running for mayor and for council, and also for the orientation time for those newly elected. Right now, it is vague and it's subject to wide interpretation. This would make it much more specific. Any comments? Any? Mr. Timian.
Would it be appropriate at this time to make it a motion so we can have a discussion on it?
That would be fine.
I would move that we would recommend the inclusion of the change in 3.01 as has been discussed.
Okay. Mr. Timian. Okay, and a second?
Madam Chair, second.
Okay. Discussion?
Well, it seems to me that what you said, it does a pretty good job of explaining what is meant by that term, executive and administrative power. So I think it makes sense to expand it.
Okay. Ms. Knudsen?
Madam Chair, well, I obviously like it because I made the suggestion, so I just know I'll be supporting it.
Madam Chair, you know, I work in a lot of businesses and work with a lot of committees, and when I read this, it only makes sense to me in the business that I'm involved in throughout the state and the city, and I think it's written very nicely, and it makes sense to me.
Okay. Any other? Okay. Roll. Are there any comments from the public? Councilor Jameson?
Hi, I guess I get Greg Jameson, Sioux Falls City Council. I guess I get this task. The council spent, well, actually, I like some of the ideas here. The biggest problem we have is that we spent a year discussing the idea of whether or not the city council should be approving all contracts for the city. Went through a service committee. Certainly, we had all kinds of discussion with the administration and their opposition to that practice. But in the end, the council voted 7-1 to pass an ordinance that requires that the city council be advised and consent, essentially, of all contracts by the city. Just last night, we had a council meeting, and I have a list of all the contracts that we approved under the consent agenda. It went seamless. The process works very well. We've been doing this for, I think, just a couple of months now, and we haven't seen any problems with this action. I think the explanation of the executive power is probably needed. I would just caution you that I was trying to find it in the charter where it talks about the council's ability and or the council's authority to approve all these contracts, but I couldn't quite find it before I got the call to come up here. But I like some of the explanation of it, but I also just wanted you to know that the council has been working diligently to get this process in place. And the reason is for better government. If you look at why we did this, the whole intention was to bring transparency to all these contracts that are done by the city. And if we bring transparency to this process, we believe as a council that it will build trust in local government. And that's what our intentions were. We haven't taken out any of these contracts since this process was started, put them into the regular agenda for further discussion. We've gone along with just watching what's happening, how it's done, paying attention to all the contracts. And if a citizen comes to us and says, hey, there's an issue with this contract that's coming up that the city's entering into, could you take a closer look? Absolutely. We have that ability, we have that option. Going back to, I think, what you might be proposing, as recommended, I think we would be circumventing what the council was intending to have happen. And so far, we haven't seen any hemorrhaging effect by the administration and their ability to execute these contracts. They still negotiate the contracts. They still award the contracts. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think the intention is to remove the authority of the council to in essence, make the final approval on these contracts. And I think in this attempt, we're going around what the council intended, and the council spent a year in the process of reviewing and figuring out all the timelines and how to make it work so it worked with the administration. And we found that harmony spot, if you will. So I just hate to see us revert back to an old way of doing things when we spend an enormous amount of time to try to make it better, to improve local government through transparency, and the public hopefully will build confidence in what the government is doing and how we're spending their money. Any questions about how the council feels? A 7-to-1 vote approving that process is a pretty strong opinion about how they feel.
Thank you. Ms. Knudsen?
Madam Chair, is that, and appreciate Councilor Jameson's comments today, is that, again, the reason I made this suggestion was really for the future and not looking backwards, and again, took it right out of state law. As fond as I am of the City Council and the President City Councilors, and very appreciative of their hard work, I actually believe, I'm very well aware of the fact that that was a 7-to-1 vote, and that was fairly recently. I believe actually in this case the City Council erred in its role, but that's kind of beside the point at this point. So I'm just working forward on improving the charter. The South Dakota legislature does not approve state contracts. I'm all for open government. I'm all for transparency in government, and I'm most anxious for our city's software to be so good and so up to date that all contracts that have been approved can be right there on the website for not just the city councilors to see, but everyone to see, every developer out there, every supplier, every whatever. And I believe that is the city's intention as soon as the somewhat obsolete or outdated software is replaced. So I'm just saying, Councilor Jameson, I too favor transparency and open government, and I think it would be wonderful for all contracts to be approved as the charter indicates. I mean, the charter, I do not believe, says anywhere in the current city charter that the council should be in the business of approving contracts. I don't believe that's there, and if it is, I would like to be corrected as soon as possible. But again, we think of ourselves as city councilors or I did when I was there, as a kind of a legislative branch, and South Dakota legislature does not approve any state contracts, just to carry that a step further. So I'm still be very interested in having this proposal added to the current charter.
Okay, are there any other comments, discussion? Okay, we do have a motion on the floor to approve this. Could I have a voice vote on this, if there is no more discussion? Roll call.
Committee members Gregerson,
Aye.
Hannenson,
Aye.
Knudsen,
Aye.
Timjohn,
Aye.
Leddies.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, next we go to proposals from the legal department. And I will turn this over to our city attorney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any additions from our last meeting on these. Just as an update, I can't remember if I stated this last time to the commission, but the proposed change regarding the Board of Ethics, I've been talking with several council members as well as the Board of Ethics, and confirming that there's significant support for expanding the role of the Board of Ethics. And I've looked at the prior commission dealings over the last 14 years, and there's certainly a history of an expansion of the Board of Ethics role in terms of providing that independent citizen advisory board function. And I have yet to hear any opposition from any council member or Board of Ethic member, so I think I can safely state to this commission that I think this would have overwhelming support to provide an independent oversight for any possible election ordinance violations for current city officials. And I'd be happy to take myself out of that role very much. I think the other ones are pretty self-explanatory and merely not substantive, but just some technical changes.
Okay.
So that's all I'd have.
Okay, so we will need to go through each of these, correct? Okay, Article 1, Powers of the City, Section 1.01. Could I have a motion? Mr. Timian?
Move for recommended passage.
Madam Chair, I'll second that.
Okay, is Mr. Annenson? Okay, any discussion, any input? Okay, could I have a roll call vote on this one?
Sorry, I think I did a copy of it. Committee members Palettis,
Yes.
Tim John,
Yes.
Ananson,
Yes.
Gregerson,
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Okay, Section 2.11, Procedure. This again, we went over at the last meeting. Can I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to adopt Section 2-11.
Okay, Mr. Annenson. And a second?
I'll second that motion. Knutson?
Okay, any discussion? Public input? Okay, roll call vote?
I wonder if we should be reading the sections into the minutes. Would you like me to read those? So the listening public knows what we're voting on?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. Section 2.11, the change to subsection B merely updates the vernacular to minutes rather than a journal being maintained of council meetings. This change would be consistent with state law, which provides the process for the minutes that must be kept by a public body for its meetings. Commission members Palettis,
Yes.
Tim John,
Yes.
Annenson,
Yes.
Gregerson,
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes.
Motion carries. Okay, next, Section 2.14, updating the Code of Ordinances. And this is just taking out 1972 and adding in 2012 for updating the Code of Ordinances. Can I have a motion on this one?
I move for approval. Knutson?
A second?
Second.
Gregerson, second. Okay, any discussion? Okay, could I have a roll call vote?
Committee members Timian,
Yes.
Annenson,
Yes.
Gregerson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Polides.
Yes. Okay, motion carries. And the last one is Section 7.01, Conflicts of Interest, Board of Ethics. And this is adding the section, or 6.01C for current elected officials, adding this to the Board of Ethics.
Motion to recommend passage.
Okay. Mr. Timian, second.
Second.
Mr. Annenson. Okay, any discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
Commission members Timian,
Yes.
Annenson,
Yes.
Gregerson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Polides.
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, next we have proposals from the Finance Department. Mr. Turbeck.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. Tracy Turback, Finance Director for the City of Sioux Falls. I believe you have in your your agenda packet some suggested changes to Article 5, and I'm here today to respectfully request that the Commission consider those changes relating to the budget and the capital planning process. The specific recommended changes are summarized in the information I provided, as well as set out in detail in terms of the exact language change that I would recommend for you. Those changes really affect 4 separate sections within Article 5. The first 2 sections affected would be 505 and 506. And those changes are really intended to accomplish 3 things in those 2 particular sections. First of all, those changes would have the City Council approve the budget for the appropriated funds once and only once, and this would be done by adopting the annual appropriation ordinance. The second intended change to those sections would result in the deadline for approval of the annual appropriation moving to September 30th. And the third change would be to line up the publication requirements for the proprietary and trust funds of the city to be consistent with the publication of the budgets for all of the other city funds, so that everything is published at the same time. The second, the third section affected would be Section 5.09, and as I read through the charter, I didn't really see any purpose to Section 509. I believe the charter spells out very clearly the administration process for the budget, and so my recommendation is that you ought to consider simply eliminating Section 509. And lastly, in Section 511, my recommendation would be to amend this to require that the mayor's 5-year capital program be submitted by August 1st, which would line that date up with the deadline for the mayor to submit to the City Council the recommended annual budget, so that both of those would be presented to the City Council at the same time. And I did provide some a little more meat on the bone in terms of an explanation as to why I came to those conclusions and those recommendations. I would certainly be happy to try to answer any questions you folks have.
Tracy, on 511 AC, adoption. It seems like that's a fairly, I guess I'm not following all of the reasoning for that change about the annual appropriation ordinance, and that it is not necessary to appropriate funds. I'm not following why that is included in here.
Okay, help me out. Which particular changes are you referring to?
Well, it reads that the annual appropriation ordinance shall make appropriations by funded department or organizational unit. It is not necessary to appropriate funds to be expended from a proprietary or trust fund if that fund is not supported or subsidized by revenue derived from the annual appropriated tax levy.
Okay, and that is consistent with current language in the charter. The state law and the charter do not require trust funds or proprietary funds to be included in the formal annual appropriation ordinance. The city has, of course, accounts for all of its money in various funds. Those funds that are tax supported are considered, and are what I mean when I refer to appropriated funds. So those are more tightly controlled in the budget process because they involve general tax dollars. Proprietary funds or trust funds do not involve the appropriation or spending of tax dollars. They are like our enterprise funds, our water and sewer funds, and so those are not required to go through as rigorous a process of budget appropriation, and are not included in the annual appropriation ordinance, and never have been.
Okay, and now you'd mentioned that's currently in the charter, and so we're adding it a second time?
Well, it's being deleted down below. That's why the 2 sections, it seemed to make sense to combine those into one, Section 505 and 506. By the time I made the changes to 505, there wasn't much left in 506. So
I see.
Thank you for...
So you just moved that paragraph from one section to
Essentially,
another?
that language just moved up one.
Okay.
Yep.
Because otherwise
I'm sorry, I should...
it seemed like it was fairly substantial language to be in there, but it was just that paragraph moved from one section to another.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, for section 5.05, can I have a motion?
Madam Chair?
Okay. Is there any public input on these? Okay, can I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to adopt Section 505 as written from Tracy.
Okay, Mr. Anderson. Okay, and a second?
I second that motion, Knutson.
Okay, discussion?
Is 506 going to be then a separate motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, a roll call vote?
Commission members Timian,
Yes.
Annenson,
Yes.
Gregerson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Politis.
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, section 5.06, which would be deleting that section.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to delete Section 5.06, appropriation of revenue ordinances, as Mr. Turbach recommended. Knutson.
Okay, a
Second, Timian.
Okay. Any discussion?
Is it appropriate to ask a question at this
Yes.
point? Sue Roust, interim city clerk. Are the action, I'm not quite clear, are the actions you're taking now to recommend that these be placed on the ballot? They
Yes.
are? Okay.
Yes.
You've already approved 5, this was number 6 and 7. I would just point out that if you do Section 505 and Section 506 separately, so they are presented to the voters separately, there's a potential for one to pass and the other not to. And you're going to have a mess because the two of them go together. So I would urge you to perhaps rethink the action you're taking right now and change your motion so that Section 5.05 and 5.06 are added as one potential amendment.
Very good point. Thank you, Sue. Okay.
I would like to make that motion, Knutson.
Okay. Second?
Second, Madam Chair, but when you have to amend the motion, you have to amend the previous motion, I believe.
Just a,
Madam Chair, it'd be a substitute motion by Ms. Knutson to,
okay, a substitute motion? Okay.
That's what I meant to say.
Okay. And do I have second?
Gregerson, second.
Mr. Anderson. Okay, any discussion on that? This will be combining sections 5.05 and 5.06 in the same motion.
And then repealing the motion we made earlier, correct?
Yes, this is a substitute motion
Well-
for the previous.
But we've already voted on the prior one, haven't we?
I would suggest doing this substitute motion, going back and reconsidering the other motion. We'll have to formally undo for 505 only, but for now, I'd suggest substitute motion to combine these two together, and then we'll go back and clean up the other one.
Okay. Can I have a roll call vote?
Commission members Timian,
Yes.
Annenson,
Yes.
Gregerson,
Yes.
Ye-
Knutson,
Yes.
Politis.
Yes. Okay. Go to the next one, or? Motion, pardon?
Okay. I'll make a motion to reconsider the 505 as a separate item.
And I'll second that motion, Knutson.
Any discussion?
I appreciate Sue Rouse's suggestion.
Yes, it's a very good point. Okay, can I have a roll call vote on that?
So
So this is,
what we're voting on now would be to reverse our prior vote.
yes.
Correct. So you'd want to, if you want to reverse your prior vote, you vote no on considering 505 as a separate item on the ballot.
Okay.
So that'll clean it up.
Okay, roll call.
Commission members Timian,
No.
Annenson,
No.
Gregerson,
No.
Knutson,
No.
Polides.
No. Motion fails. Okay, now, section 5.11 on the capital program. Can I have a motion on this one?
I move for approval of Section 511 as revised, changing July 1st to August. Knutson.
Okay, and a second? Can I have a second?
Second, Gregerson.
Okay, any discussion?
I'm not going to suggest you back off on anything again. Sue Roust, interim city clerk. There are at least two city council members in the audience, and I guess I would like to ask their opinion. This really foreshortens the time that they have to review both the capital program and the annual budget. If neither one of them are presented to the council until August 1st, and they have to approve the final budget by September 30th, I would just question if this leaves adequate time for their review of both budgets. And I don't know if anybody would care to follow up on that or not.
Councilor Jamison or Anderson?
I get to carry all the laundry today. I would say in the past, and Councilor Knutson can probably attest to this, but there is generally never enough time for the council to review the budget. It's extremely complicated. It's generally dollar amounts that we never deal with in our personal lives. The council is reviewing the process. The fiscal committee talked about this yesterday. Review the whole budget approval process and how that's presented to us from the administration and presented to the public so that we can possibly get the public to be engaged in this process of approving the budget. When I first read that, I wasn't overly concerned because I've got nearly 4 years of experience looking at the budgets. But I can tell you as new counselors come on, and in just a few short months you've got potential of 4 new counselors coming on. As the new counselors come on board, there's a learning curve that occurs. It takes them longer to go through this process. As we become seasoned veterans, maybe after a couple of budgets, it's simpler and faster for us. But, as far as a specific timeline, I wouldn't be in favor of shortening it, but I can deal with it myself. If you're after the council to be better informed and the public to be better informed, if that's what your intentions are and reasons to change this for the charter, then I would lengthen that time, not shorten it.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on this? Okay. Councilor Anderson?
Thank you. Being on the council the last 4 years, working with the councilors that I work with at this time and the previous council, every year we've struggled with the process of budgeting and looking over this budget and the CIP. And I feel that shortening that time would put a lot more stress on the council members and would not allow us to be able to go through the budget as properly as we should be able to. So I'm not for this motion.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Mr. Gregerson?
Maybe I missed this, but what is the reason for changing this, making this change to August instead of July 1?
The charter currently calls for the annual budget to be submitted by August 1st. This would change that, the requirement for the 5-year capital program to be submitted at the same time rather than July 1st. The annual budget is comprised largely, a big share of it anyway, is capital spending. And so a good share of the capital plan that's presented currently with the budget is already presented as part of the budget. This simply lines those deadlines up. Both documents are presented to the City Council at the same time. And keep in mind, the capital plan does not appropriate any money, doesn't authorize any spending. It simply is establishing what the long-term plan of the city is. Whereas the budget, on the other hand, does appropriate money and does authorize spending to move forward. So it's simply a way, I believe, of streamlining the process and making it somewhat more logical. Thank you.
So then, if I'm to understand correctly, what it is that they would be submitted at the same time rather than a month apart.
That's correct.
Another question.
Mr. Gregerson?
What do you think of the arguments against this as far as the time for the council to look? Do you feel that's a legitimate concern?
Well, I certainly take the council members at their word. However, there has been a significant change in many regards relative to the council's involvement in the budget process this past year, and that is they have created the position of a council budget analyst, and so they will have a very strong resource to rely on in terms of analyzing the mayor's recommended budget and the capital plan, and a lot of the legwork and the number crunching, so to speak, can certainly be done now by the council's budget analysts rather than the council members having to do a lot of that work themselves on their own, using their own time. So I think that their concerns should be mitigated significantly by the fact that they now have a budget analyst, a full-time position on board to do a lot of that work for them.
Dee? Mr. Knudsen?
Madam Chair, is it, I was just trying to think. I very much respect getting input from current city councilors on all these proposals, because that's important, because they're working with the charter right now every week. From a theoretical standpoint, I do not in any way want to rush a process to make it harder for any current city councilor or any future city councilor to have adequate time to review this information. So I appreciate interim city clerk Sue Rouse thoughts, and the city councilors who are present. So that's theoretical for me. From a practical standpoint, it seems quite, it seems consistent to have them do at the same time. And in my 8 years on city council, the truth of the matter is we very seldom heard from anyone, unfortunately, regarding the very large city budget. We had budget hearings several days in a row. Try daytime, try night, try this, try that. Very seldom had anyone or very few people attend them. I'm just saying from a practical standpoint, I'm not minimizing the importance of the process. I'm just saying from a practical standpoint, we had very little input, nor did I receive what you would call very many calls, if any, that I can remember, or emails on the city budget. So that's what I'm just struggling with a little bit, the theoretical and the practical. And I hadn't even remembered an important point as far as that the city council will have their own city budget analyst. So anyway, I guess I'm just thinking out loud.
Sue?
If I might respond to a couple points that have been made. One, the issue of it makes sense to present these two at the same time. I can only suggest the comparison to Minnehaha County, where there are long-range plans presented, a 4 to 5 year intention of what the county will be doing, what the county departments will be doing. That is presented a month before the budgets. So the county commission gets to see the overall plan for the next several years, and then they see how the budget fits into that. That, to me, syncs perfectly with what the charter currently requires, which is first the council gets the big picture view, and then a month later, they get the details of the following year's budget. They're really two different things, and I think that's a good sequence. Secondly, the council does have quite a few budget hearings, and I certainly agree with you, Ms. Knutson, that just as at the county we struggled to get public input, I am certain that at the city the same occurs. But whether or not you get public input, the city council is charged with reviewing that budget and approving it. It's a very important task that they schedule several meetings, as you certainly know from your past experience, to look through the details of that budget. That budget is a good inch thick. And by shortening the time, you just make it more difficult for our elected policymakers to fully consider that budget. So I would encourage you to give them the time needed to give it a good look.
Mr. El Grisman.
Just an idea on scheduling time. I mean, on paper to have everything due the same day. I mean, I remember in college you've got 3 exams the same day is not a real good thing. If you had the CIP 2 months ahead, it's a 5-year plan. It's not something that, I mean, that's something you can look an extra month ahead. And if the budget people schedule their workers to get that one out of the way early and have the other one a month ahead, then the council can start looking 2 months ahead at one and spread their time out. Look at one this month, the other that month. I think the council people could spread their work out and the budget people could spread their work out and have it all done.
Okay, any other?
Madam Chair, after the discussion that we have had and appreciate is that I would like to make a motion to stay with the date as it is now and give the city councilors an extra month. Knutson, July 1st.
Okay, now we already have a motion.
They just vote no.
Table. So do a vote first and then.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, we already got a motion.
Do a roll call, please.
Yes, sorry about that. That's my mistake.
Just vote no.
Could you clarify what we're voting on, please?
The motion is to approve.
Section 5.11, motion made by Knutson and Gregerson to approve the recommended changes under Section 5.11, changing the date for the submission of the capital program.
Thank you.
Ready for the vote?
Yeah.
Commission members Timian,
No.
Annenson,
Yes.
Gregerson,
I'm confused. I got to be clear. Can I ask a question for clarification? Are we, we're voting the motion now to approve this change? All right. No.
Knutson,
No.
Valides.
No.
So you have 4 no and 1 yes.
Okay. Would you like to restate your motion now? The motion fails. The initial motion.
We don't, the motion fails.
Okay,
So
okay.
we're done with
That's it. And I did skip over section 5.09. It's a small section on here, administration of the budget, and it was to delete that.
I so move, or Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I so move that we delete section 5.09, administration of the budget. It's just one sentence. The city council shall provide by ordinance the procedures for administering the budget, and it's not necessary, and I make a motion to delete it. Knutson.
Okay, is there a second? Do I have a second?
Madam Chair, I'll second.
Mr. Anderson? Okay, any discussion? Okay, can I have a roll call vote on that?
Commission members Timian,
There's no public input.
Is there any public input on this? Okay, roll call.
Okay, so they, in looking at this one, that everywhere else in the charter, that elsewhere in the charter, the administration of the budget is addressed, that is what was in the explanation, correct?
Yes.
So how would that, so then it's, all it's doing is clarifying?
Is this just a clarification, correct? Or a cleanup?
Yeah, this particular sentence says that the city council should adopt ordinances to provide for the administration of the budget. In my search of the existing city ordinances, I don't find that the council has ever done that. I believe, and that's largely, in my opinion, because the administration of the budget and the process is laid out in the charter. The adoption of the budget, how the budget is amended, and how it's carried forward. So I think the charter already does what this particular passage would have the council do by ordinance.
Thank you.
Question,
Mr. Gregerson?
is it just by motion then? How do you provide for whatever procedure you're adopting? Is it by ordinance or what?
Well, the section that, this 509 indicates that the city council would adopt procedures to administer the budget by ordinance, which is there's a very deliberate process under state law, as you folks are probably aware, to adopt an ordinance. In my review, I don't see that the council has ever done that. I don't know if Mr. Fifley can tell us how long this particular provision, if that was in the original charter, if that's something that was added. But apparently the council didn't find it necessary to ever adopt ordinances, and I would submit that that's because the charter has already done that, has already laid out those procedures within Article 5 for administration of the budget.
That's my question. What procedure is followed? What have they done then? What takes the place of the ordinance under the present procedure?
Well, the charter calls for the city council to adopt the budget for the appropriated funds by ordinance each year. I mean, I suppose they could take those provisions out of the charter and repeat them and place them into a city ordinance, and then they would be both places. But I'm not sure what other procedures you would put into ordinance that don't already exist in the charter. I mean, it was simply a suggestion that it seemed to me, in my reading of the charter, to be a passage in there that really didn't have any purpose or effect. It certainly does no harm leaving it in there either way. I'm not going to be disappointed if you choose to continue to leave it in there, but I just don't see that it serves any purpose.
Thank you.
Ms. Roust?
I'm looking at the city ordinance, Chapter 2 on administration. The ordinances, of course, are passed by the city council. Article 5 under there is financial regulations, and it includes accounting publications adopted and revenues and special funds. And perhaps most importantly, it creates the Department of Finance, directs that the city finance officer shall file a bond of a certain amount, that the city finance officer shall perform the duties of the city auditor and treasurer, and I think that's probably what's referred to. Not, there's not a lot in ordinance, but the council has created or has approved these ordinances related to the administration of the budget. The charter sets out the adoption of the budget very clearly, but I think this is probably kind of the next thing. I would also urge this commission to look at the number of proposed amendments you're going to put on the budget. or on the ballot. I believe there've never been more than 10, and I think we're getting up close to 10 already, and you still have some more proposals to hear. That becomes a consideration when you think about voter understanding of all the potential changes on the ballot.
Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. On this proposal, on the two councils that I've sat on, the councils have worked with the administration on the presentation of the budget and the CIP. And I feel that that's why there has not been any ordinance changes done by the city council at this time, is that there's always been that cooperation. So I ask that you do not remove this part of the charter.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public input? Any further discussion? Ms. Knudsen?
Madam Chair, yeah, I'm a little bit confused. My understanding was from the proposal from the Finance Department, again, that this was just extraneous language because it's already spelled out elsewhere that the City Council administers the budget. I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. Mr. Turbach, would you help me one more time on this? Why did you recommend this to us?
When I sat down to review the charter, and particularly in Article 5, I'm just looking at it from a comprehensive perspective, and when I came to that section of the charter, it didn't really seem to me that it served any particular purpose. It calls for the council to adopt ordinances for the administration of the budget, and I did review those ordinances that Mrs. Rouse just mentioned, and I didn't interpret those as having anything necessarily to do with the administration of the budget. Certainly that's one perspective. But I believe that the procedures for administering the budget are laid out fairly thoroughly in the charter as it is today. So,
Okay.
Mr. Feifley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just the revision that you've already put on for a proposal on Section 301, one of the specific duties is administration of the budget. So I'd suggest that at this point, 509 is actually in conflict with the proposal under 301. So you'd probably be better off to delete or repeal this section to keep it congruent. And also, I mean, you don't need to be an English major. D. Knudsen can appreciate this. Administrative duties, it's the same root, that of administering, and the mayor has the administrative duties for the city. So based on what you've already done to Section 301 with that proposal, it makes total sense to then take out 509. But I agree with Councilor Anderson, there's been a lot of cooperation there. And certainly the council still has the power of the purse. You're not taking away that power at all. And there are several other safeguards in the charter itself in terms of the ability to transfer funds can only be done within a department. It cannot be done from department to department by the mayor. So there are very significant safeguards already in the charter. So I would suggest repealing 509 for that reason.
Okay. Ms. Knudsen?
No, and would you just remind me, so we have a motion made and seconded, right, on this? I made that motion, I've forgotten, it was so long ago.
Yes, there's a motion made by Knudsen, seconded by Annenson to remove this section.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. Could we have a roll call vote?
Commission members Timian,
Yes.
Annenson,
Yes.
Gregerson,
Yes.
Knudsen,
Yes.
Polides.
Yes. Motion carries. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Gregerson?
What Sue said about the number of issues you have in the ballot, we talked about that the last time I was on this committee too. That is a concern, because if you get too many, it's just going to be extremely confusing to the voters.
Is this something we would...
And they don't have time to
Right.
study the issues.
Is this something we would need to, that we could address in our next meeting on the 27th? As to what should be included on the...
Madam Chair, Timian, to me, it would make sense that when we got all done, we could take that list and then prioritize and say, how do we want to do this so that the changes we're recommending would have the perhaps the best chance of passing and going forward, that we don't overwhelm with minor changes.
Okay.
Similar to
Chair,
when we combined 505 and 506, it was then one instead of two votes.
Madam Chair, I think, there's still the opportunity for this commission to approve the final proposed ballot that would go to the city clerk. So I think there would still be an opportunity at your last meeting to certainly revisit this issue. And if there are some items that you say maybe it's of less importance or priority, that in terms of how much to give to the voters at a certain time, I think you have that opportunity.
And those would be items that we could consider next year. Ms. Knudsen?
Madam Chair, and I don't disagree with any of the comments that have been just made, and I do think it's very important for us to provide adequate information to the public and be available ourselves to help explain our proposals. I mean, I just think voters need to be well informed before they vote, so we need to help them in every way we can.
Okay, do we need a motion on that? Okay. Next, potential proposals from the City Council, and Councilor Jameson has some proposals to bring forward.
Hello and thank you. I've got 5 minor changes I'd like to recommend. The first 2 are really connected, and it's really for clarification. I'd like to state that I'm not here to strip the mayor of his power or authority. I'm here to improve local government, and I think we can do that with some minor changes. I don't want to read all this if you've had a chance to review them. If you haven't had a chance, I'd certainly or summarize them for you. Have you had a chance to review the 5? Okay, well, the first one really is simple in that it's clarifying exactly who is a member of the council. If you read the charter, several locations in the charter refers to the mayor and the city council. And I think there's clarification that could be done to improve that. But you need to do both of those, the first 2, really in tandem, because the second item here that I'm suggesting, section 2.03 under mayor, is just specifying where in the charter, that the mayor is a member of the council as specified by the charter. And essentially the mayor has 3 distinct roles as a member of the council, and that is to veto legislation that comes through. He has that power, and I'm not taking any of that away from him. The ability to run the council meetings. He does that today. I'm not taking that away from him. What is the third?
Break a tie?
Pardon me?
Maybe break a tie?
Break a tie. Exactly. Very good. So none of those authorities are diluted in any way in this change. It just clarifies, I think, and it will help others as we review the charter on our own, when and where the council is the council and when the mayor is involved. Just for example, when we replaced a Councilor Litz, when Councilor Litz left, the council members were the ones who appointed the new member. By all standards and and probably by the definitions currently in the charter, it would have allowed the mayor to participate in that vote. He hasn't. Previous mayors have not. I don't think it's a good idea for the mayor to be involved in that. It's probably never intended to have happen. When we appoint and we do reviews of our current city clerk and previous city clerks, the mayor has never been a part of those council decisions or review of those staff employees, even though by this definition it would be interpreted that he is a member of the council. So that's part of my intention, is to clarify exactly where the mayor is a part of the council. So the first one simply removes the mayor under the composition of the council. Essentially, I'm deleting the word composed of, and deleting the words the mayor and. So it just strictly says composed of 8 members, 3 council members shall be nominated. You've got the rest there. If you'd like, I can go through each one or all of them and then ask questions however you'd like. Any problems with that one?
Madam Chair, I have a question. The way I read this really contradicts what we did earlier on our agenda with Joe Kirby, doesn't it? This contradicts what we did earlier.
Some of it.
Yeah, so this is, when I look at this, what we did earlier is totally different than what you're wanting us to do, so now you're wanting us to change what we did earlier in our meeting.
Well, I don't have that in front of me as far as totally changing it. I'm sorry if I...
The proposal that we did from Joe Kirby. And because I read this several times last night, and when I read this, it's a lot less involved city council. You're just reverting back to what we already approved earlier, the way I see this.
Yeah, it's troublesome to be after some items on the agenda. And if you were to read that measure, you would interpret it probably to include that the mayor is in charge of hiring all employees, right?
Right.
On the council side and the mayor's side. And that's never been the practice, never been the idea. At least it certainly hasn't been what we've been practicing ever since this forum was started. It doesn't make sense, probably, to have the mayor involved in those decisions, but that was a decision you made as a group. You know, I'm all for clarification, but disciplining, if the mayor was involved in disciplining our staff without acknowledging or doing any of the evaluations throughout the year, it wouldn't make sense, would it? That's the struggle that we're going to have if the voters approve your, if it's Joe Kirby's amendment, whoever's it might be, if you include that, that's the struggles we're going to have in clarification later on. So it's very good that you noticed that. It's the struggle I had with it, but I understand there needs to be clarification under the mayor's executive powers. Because it isn't, it's just a sentence in there. But you went, I believe this one goes way over. In fact, if I could.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Ms. Knudsen.
May I ask Councilor
Yes.
Jameson a question? Councilor Jameson, will you help me again? I actually have read, talking about the first couple of your proposals. Actually, I read them very closely, carefully a couple times. Help me again on what problem does this fix? I mean, because we know that the mayor, whoever it is, presides over council meetings, votes only in case of tie, and can veto legislation. So those are 3 fairly significant items, I think. And so to me, that kind of seems like that person is, considered part of the, council. But it's what I'm confused about is what does this fix, or what? I'm confused on what you're trying to. I'm confused on where the problem is and what we're trying to fix here.
It's really clarification. When the idea that everybody refers to the city council, they refer to the body of 8 elected members to the city council. When we receive notices of emails and things, the mayor is not included in the group of city councilors. So it's probably a little closer into the weeds for people like me who were paying attention to exactly who is who and who is responsible of what, that I need clarification. And the clarification here is all it is, about exactly who is a member of the council, because those 3 items you pointed out are specifically listed in the charter as when the mayor is a member of the council. Those three specifically are listed in the charter, so it just makes it easy. Those are easy to follow. That's why it's confusing when you start off as he's a member of the council.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Ms. Knudsen?
Okay, Councilor Jameson, like, I understand that, the core city council is, there are 8 city councilors, I understand that, but like, or like that example used on email or whatever, like we're talking about, personnel issues within the city council or whatever, that, or city council staff, that's just for those
Right.
8 people, I understand that. But for instance, on, that, I'm just going back to that example you used for, have you help me a little bit more, but like, for instance, when you said something about emails, again, depending on the nature of the email, but, if the nature of the email or the discussion is on an issue that the mayor, whoever it is going to need to be able to vote on in case of a tie, that person is going to need to be up to speed on the issue, right? And so when you follow what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I don't see a problem how it is now, and that's what I'm confused on why you're really suggesting this, but.
Well, it isn't outlined in the charter, I suppose, is perhaps when the council is replacing one of its members, that only the council is involved in that process. Now, I could have gone through, I suppose, and outlined all of those special places where only the council makes these decisions, but I found that to be, in fact, that's where I started. I actually was going through the whole charter that way, and it turned into be a huge problem. That's why I went back to changing it at the very beginning, and I'm not deleting and removing any power of the mayor. Remember that, because he's granted all of that authority and power in other places, specifically in the charter.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Ms. Knudsen?
Councilor Gregson, no, I understand that. I understand that they're not trying to minimize the mayor's power or authority in any way. I understand that and respect that. I was just thinking again, it's kind of the theoretical versus the practical, I guess, again here, is that I was wondering if, in fact, there really is any problem, because in the 8 years I was on city council, including some of the years that I had the privilege of serving with you, is that when it got to be time to, once a year for us to elect our chair or vice chair, no one had to tap the mayor on the shoulder. I'm kind of teasing now how to say this, and say, hey, you need to go. It just automatically got up and left, because it wanted us to choose our own chair and vice chair, and that was never an issue. And likewise, when there was a vacancy on the council, we did the interviewing and made the choice. So I'm just saying that has all worked, I think, very well the way it is now, without any charter change in the language. And that's what I was confused about, because I do think that there are those, I agree with you, there are those times where the mayor should not be involved and is not involved and has not been involved. And so I'm trying to figure out what problem we're trying to fix.
It's preventing the problem from ever occurring. Like you say, it's been tradition. It's been the practice of previous mayors. But now let's say the next mayor comes along and says, look, I'm a member of the council. I'm going to be involved in everything you do, and you can't keep me out. By definition here, those traditional practices would be gone.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Again, not in argumentative fashion, just discussion, obviously, is, again, if I were the next mayor, and I really not planning to run, but anyway, but I'm joking, is that if in fact I was clearly out of bounds on something like that, I would expect the chairman and the vice chair to quickly put me in my place, appropriate fashion, and I just can't see that happening.
Fair enough. My intentions here were to clarify this so that those kinds of discussions would never occur, because the mayor, whoever that might be, and the council members, whoever they may be, would read the charter and clearly understand who has what roles. So clarification was really all I'm after. In fact, if you're not interested in it, I understand, and if you want to live with that kind of traditional practices and that kind of practice, I'm not going to die over that. I've got one under later in here that that I will die on the sword for, but not that one. So if you want, I can go through all of them. You can make your decisions on each if you'd like. I'm not sure how you want to
Would you
handle
like
yours.
to go through each?
Well,
Have the counselor go review each one.
I think just in light of the numbers, it'd be nice to me to go through all 5.
Okay.
And then I'm curious as to which one that you would rank as the most important.
Sure. All right, then, very good. The second one is as I alluded to with the first one, is simply the mayor shall serve as a member of the city council as specified by this charter. This further clarifies what I was intending to do with the first one. And there are specific places in the charter that allows the mayor to veto, to vote in case of a tie, to preside at the meetings. Those are specifically laid out in the charter. So there's no misunderstanding about what those roles are. So it's just further clarification. Now we're getting close to, the city clerk. City clerk position is an appointed position by the city council. This is just an internal process, I would say probably because we've just experienced one of the most painful processes we've ever experienced as a council, and that was terminating the employment of one of our appointed staff. And this measure would really essentially make it clear exactly what it takes to hire and fire that person, because it isn't stated in charter in any way about how we should handle that. So we just went through this as a council and experienced this trouble ourselves. This really would just lay out essentially the rules that the city clerk can only be appointed and removed by a supermajority vote. And that, in my mind, is 6 votes, 6 of 8, 3/4 of the council. I think it makes it crystal clear of what the council's intentions are, either when we're hiring somebody or firing them. Today, as we hire people, and we just recently hired a budget analyst, we voted on as council, but this just lays it out, that it takes 6 votes to do it, not just a simple majority. So what my perspective is that this will create, I believe, a united council in the appointment and the dismissal of our city clerk.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
may I
Ms.
ask a
Knudsen.
question? May I ask a question? Councilor Jameson, is that the flip side of that point to me is whoever, in the future, whoever the city clerk is, or right now the interim city clerk, at the point that and I kind of mean this for any office too, is that at the point that a majority of the elected officials, whether they're legislators or city councilors or county commissioners or whatever, so I'm not talking about just here, but it just seems to me at the point that a majority of the elected officials, for one reason or another, when I don't, I mean appropriate reason, like I'm saying have lost confidence for whatever reason in their hired person, that I question how effective that person can be with that elected body. I'm talking about even more than the city council. So I'm just saying that I still would prefer a majority vote. I would think that would be, I think at the point that a majority of elected officials have lost confidence in someone for some reason, valid reason obviously, that I can't imagine that would be very efficient operation of the office.
Perhaps. I think the intention here is really to create a higher threshold so that things don't turn into something maybe that they're not intending to be. And terms of councilors change very frequently. Coalitions change. People change. And opinions change about the value of those people. And I think having 6 involved in the dismissal of an appointed clerk or really just creates a higher threshold, and it just further clarifies the process. So even imagine yourself being hired for this position, and/or working for the city as the city clerk. You know exactly what it's going to take for your removal, and even as it could potentially be the appointment of your position. So you couldn't have 5 people hire and fire anybody. 6 is just a little bit more, and it isn't unanimous. It's just 6.
Right. I just believe, Madam Chair?
Yes.
I believe that it's difficult to get united fronts in government on almost anything. I mean, it's wonderful and ideal when it happens, but I think it's, when you said that it would probably create more of a united front, I guess I doubt that, but it would be ideal.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move that we close the debate.
Sure.
Okay.
All right, the next item I have is the mayor's duties and responsibilities. This further clarifies the idea
Madam
that...
Chair, you need to act on my motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I second his motion.
Okay. All in favor? Discussion?
Aye.
All in favor? To stop the discussion on that particular.
Yes, let me clarify it on what was it, 208? 208 we were talking about.
Yes.
Yes, it was on 208, closed debate at 208.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay.
All right, very good. The next one is the mayor's duties and responsibilities. This is a further clarification of when the mayor shall preside at the meetings. We do have the 4 o'clock informational meetings. We have specific committee meetings that we have. I think there's 5 different committee meetings that the mayor does not preside at. And this stems from our beginning of our discussion here. There's the defining the role of the mayor or the members of the city council and eliminating the mayor, because there are other meetings that the council has that the mayor does not preside at. So this just clarifies it, that the mayor shall preside at the regular, monthly, and special city council meetings that we have. So if there's a special council meeting that's requested by either the council or the mayor shall still preside there. If during the regular 7 o'clock monthly meetings of the council, the mayor presides. But all the other meetings, it's just now clear that the mayor is not going to be presiding at our committee meetings or the 4 o'clock meeting, which is traditional, but again, I'm just clarifying that. That's my intention.
So this is tied in with Section 2.03, correct?
Well, I would actually argue that probably...
As specified.
That's probably true, as well as 2.02.
Yeah. Okay, are there any questions on this one?
Madam Chair, I move that we postpone indefinitely 202, 203, and 303.
Okay, can I have a second?
Second. Timian.
Discussion? Dee?
Question. Mr. Robinson, would you just help me on the, did you mean?
Postpone indefinitely. Want me to read the clarification on postpone indefinitely?
Okay.
Postpone indefinitely. I used to be in charge of Robert's Rules of Order, so I'm pretty familiar with most of these. I'll read it to you. This is to kill the motion. The motion cannot be reintroduced at this meeting. It would have to be discussed at another meeting.
Okay, and Madam Chair?
Yes.
And Mr. Robinson, thank you. And and I think you just answered my next question, which was, would it be possible from your intent of your motion that we could spend some time on this at our January 27th meeting?
You can. the majority of the vote is required and a postpone can be brought up at another meeting, but no longer at this meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion?
Okay, and
Yes.
Dennis, that would cover which ones?
All of them but, what I say, it was 202, 203, and they're all tied together, which is 303, I believe. Yes.
Okay, but 208 and 403 weren't on there?
208 and 403 were left open.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Knutson?
Madam Chair, not wanting to offend one of my fellow commissioners on this, I would like to make could I make a substitute motion? Legally, can I make a substitute motion or not?
I don't think you can.
I would like to, if I'm legally okay on this, I'd like to make a motion, since we were trying to keep our meetings around an hour and we're almost at an hour and a half right now, that we, I'd like to make a motion that we just adjourn for today.
You can't make a motion and top another motion. You need to act on the current motion before you move to another motion.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Okay.
We need to act on the motion, I mean.
Okay, any more discussion? Now, the motion...
The vote would be to postpone indefinitely 2.02, 2.03, and 3.03. The motion was made by Annenson and second by Timian. So we'll vote on that. Does everybody understand that?
Okay, any discussion? Okay, roll call.
Okay. Commission members Timian,
Yes.
Annenson,
Yes.
Gregerson,
Yes.
Knutson,
No.
Polides.
Yes.
So 4 yes and 1 no.
Okay, motion carries.
Okay, and if I could, the legal officer, this is what I would call my most important item. And the real change here is the fact that the council would now have the ability to remove the city attorney with a vote of 6 councilors. As I referred to in the first meeting that I spoke, that there's been a long time struggle with the city council and the city attorney's office, and having the, in essence, the ability to make sure that the council receives the same service as the mayor receives. As outlined is, there shall be a legal officer of the city appointed by the mayor, effective with the advice and consent of the council. That part stays the same. But the legal officer shall serve as chief legal advisor to the city council, comma, the mayor, and all the city departments. So, in essence, the mayor has the ability to hire and fire this person, but the council only has the ability to approve the appointment of that person. I believe by adding this amendment, allowing the council with 6 votes, again a supermajority, the ability and the authority to remove that city attorney, would give the city attorney's office essentially notice that the council is should be served as well as the mayor is being served, frankly. The mayor still has the privilege to appoint the person he'd like, not taking that away. The council still needs to give advice and consent on the hiring. It's only on the removal.
Okay, are there any questions? Mr. Gregerson?
What if the mayor wants to fire the city attorney? Could he do it under this language?
Yep, fire away.
Well, then, but it says the legal officer can be removed by a supermajority.
Yes.
So you both can get rid of him.
Yes. It's just another angle, leverage you might call it, for the council to have with its chief legal counsel. If the chief legal counsel is advocating on behalf of the mayor because he's got an item he'd like to have passed by the council, and the council does not agree with that idea and is looking for our chief legal counsel to give us advice on how we might manage that, he is in conflict. And I'm trying to eliminate that. So this would put him in an independent role in the fact that he could tell the mayor, look, here's what the law says, here's what the charter says, here's what state law is, here's what you can do. And if the council comes and asks the same question, we'll get the same answer. And he won't be advocating on behalf of the mayor to essentially subterfuge what the council is working towards. Because he knows that if he's working at complete odds of the council has a mechanism to remove him or her. That's the leverage we've been missing for years and years, ever since this charter was started. And the council has been at odds with the administration on an issue. We have been handcuffed because we don't have our chief legal counsel available to us. So I'm looking for help. I'm looking for help as a council member who has sat here and has seen it happen under different administrations. It's not about this particular guy. It's not about this particular mayor. It's about what the problem has been ever since.
Mr. Gregerson?
Well, if you really want someone independent and not beholden to anyone, do you think maybe the city attorney should be elected by the people?
When I was
Like the
talking...
Attorney General for South Dakota is elected by the people.
Absolutely. When I was talking around, though, this topic with others, I should say, the elected part turned into potentially a new political animal with who somebody could have their own agenda and work on their own behalf, even though the mechanism of an elected official is perfect because the accountability comes back during the election process to the community. If he's not doing a good job for the community, he won't be reelected. We just felt it was a little too big, maybe, for where Sioux Falls is today. And the problem is there, but it isn't rampant. All we need is just a little leverage to fix this, and I think we can do it. That's all I'm asking for is a little leverage. I don't want to change the whole system and add a new body. I just need some leverage.
Any questions?
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Anderson?
when I look at this, I don't know if it should be elected by the officials, and I don't really agree with Mr. Jamison's input here, but I think it should be more that if there is an issue with the legal counsel or the city clerk, that it should maybe be referred to an ethics committee that is totally outside of the city council, and a committee that would have to have approval for the mayor in order to do it. And it would make more sense than a lot of the things that I'm reading here, because I read this, and I think if you have it, maybe it should be before a public vote, but then it becomes pretty political, and they might have their own agenda, which I agree with Mr. Jamison, but I think there should be a separate committee if you were going to change this, that it's like an ethics board that it would be referred to for the city clerk and the city legal counsel.
One of the powers we do have, I suppose, is a vote of no confidence that we could do. But it still doesn't help us. It makes it clear on how we feel, and maybe that something has happened that we don't like, but it doesn't help us. In fact, in the end, it doesn't help the city attorney. I mean, in all fairness, the guy answers to the mayor and only to the mayor. At the end of the day, it's the mayor. And all we're asking for is, by charter, that he serve as the chief legal counsel for the mayor and the city council. And without this provision, I don't think that's happening. That's just...
Madam Chair, my take on that would be, I run an independent business, and if I had to go to 8 people or 6 people in order to terminate my lawyer that works for me, I'd have a real problem. And I'd waste a lot of hours, a lot of time, a lot of energy, and I'd have a lot of different opinions. And frankly, I don't think the problem would ever get fixed. And there'd be wasted time. And this really contradicts what we already voted on from Joe Kirby, what we're talking about here. And if you put this on the ballot like it is right now, you're going to confuse the voters. And the voters are going to be very confused because it contradicts the other item we've already voted on to put on the ballot. And this totally contradicts what we said earlier. And so it's really confusion for the public. And from my thing, the city should be ran as a business. It should be ran as a business. And the mayor's in charge. And and I deal with boards, councils all the time, and it's a nightmare that you got different opinions from different people, and yeah, it's the public dollar, but at the end of the day, the mayor is responsible. That's why everybody voted on him and put him in office. And that's the way the city has been ran and should be ran. So.
Okay, is there any comment from public? Any comments here?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I think at some point, what we need to be considering is how the city is functioning today, how it's being governed, and what was the intent of the charter, and how we look going forward. I will have to say that I may not be that all that aware of what is going on, but I was maybe a little bit surprised when I walked into here today. Noticed the pictures, and I was a little bit surprised that the mayor's picture wasn't there. And I was told, no, this isn't part of the city, this is the council's house. And it really surprised me, the amount of fence building and territorialness that's going on. I guess I'd always looked at Sioux Falls as a community that pulls together on these items, and I think somehow we need to look at this on the charter is if we want two opposing forces, or are we all want to be pulling in the same direction for the city? And I think somehow we need to look at that as far as the charter, what is being done, and is it doing what we want it to do as a vehicle to govern the city of Sioux Falls. And so I think at some point we need to look at an overarching discussion and then try to take a look at these proposed amendments in that manner. So, just my opinions. Thank you.
Ms. Knutson.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to apologize. I got confused on that last motion. I thought I was voting to allow Councilor Jameson to continue with his proposals, and so I apologize for my confusion on that. And also, I am going to need to leave because I'm late to another meeting, but I look forward to our January 27th meeting, and we'll be ready to continue to improve our charter.
Okay, could I have a motion to look at these two, the 403 legal officer and the city clerk, that those be put on the agenda for discussion?
Madam Chair, I don't think you need to do anything on them if we don't choose to, do we?
Okay.
I think I move to adjourn the meeting.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Of adjourn? Aye. Opposed? Meeting is adjourned.
I was just